Welcome all to our ongoing classes related to Sheva Mitzvahs B'nei Noach, the 7 universal Noachite commandments for all of mankind, for all of the 70 nations of the world, which includes everyone on the face of the earth, except for the Jewish people, which have the Torah. We are currently studying the Shaar HaYichud Veha Emunah, the section in the Tanya, written some 200 years ago by the first Lubavitcher Rebbe, referred to as the Alter Rebbe, the old Rebbe, Rabbi Schneur Zalman of Liadi. And we are in chapter 4. We're in the middle of chapter 4. And what we're discussing right now is the two opposite attributes of the Creator, of God. On the one hand, his infinite giving and revealing of himself. Intensity beyond intense, beyond limitation, literally infinite. And on the other hand, his attribute of strength, of restraint, to hold back and not to allow that godly energy, that godly revelation to just be totally revealed, because if that were to happen, then not only would nothing else exist, but nothing else would be able to even perceive itself as an existence. Whereas what God wants in creation is to create worlds, ultimately to get to our world, this physical world that we live in. This is the ultimate purpose of everything. So to get to this world, to create this world, and to have this world be as it is by nature, the way God created it, which basically means that the Creator is hidden from creation, and in this world, that we should all come to a recognition and to a certain type of understanding, as best as we can, of the existence of the Creator, and thereby serve Him. There is much more to say about that, but that's very briefly synopsis. Now, one might think that the ability to withhold, to conceal, is not as godly as the attribute of the Creator to give infinitely and to reveal himself. That is not so. Both of them are the attributes of God. We have various different verses which enumerate his attributes. Now, man was created in the image of God, as we learn in Genesis, in Bereshis. One of the interpretations of that is that we contain within ourselves intellect, emotion, etc. And that is sort of a mirror image of the way it is upstairs, if you will, by God. So, by studying, by analyzing the way we work, the way our character traits, the way our intelligence and our emotional attributes work and function, that can give us a glimpse into understanding a little bit of the Creator. Although the verse states, "For my thoughts are not your thoughts." So God is infinitely different, but yet He created us in a way that we should be able to have some type of a perception, some type of a glimpse into understanding the way the Creator is, the way He is. The Alter Rebbe brought down a verse from Tehillim, from Psalms. Ki shemesh u'magen Hashem Elokim. That using the two of the names of God, the name Yud-Kei Vav-Kei, the 4-letter name, which means the Creator, the one who's constantly creating, And the name Elohim, which means to conceal, that's the name of strength, of severity, of withholding. And he compares that, King David, to the sun and to its sheath, to the protection that the sun has to withhold. Now, for those that are following along inside, we are now on page Ayin Tes Amud Beis, which would be translated as 79b. Otherwise, in the regular print of the Tanya, it has 158 on top of the page. And we are about 6 lines down from the top of the page. Second word, ve'af. Now, the impression given due to the contraction and the withholding and the concealment, which is through God's name of Elohim, is that we, and all the worlds for that matter, exist as a separate entity. That's the impression that we now have due to this concealment, due to this sheath withholding the intense, infinite, godly flow of energy, because otherwise we wouldn't be at all. And now the Alter Rebbe continues at this point. Ve'af, and although, shebe'emes einoi davar bifnei atzmoi, although in truth it isn't a separate entity. Elokmoi hispashtus ha'or mehashemesh, but rather it's like the expression of the light coming from the sun. Now, as we know, the sunlight cannot be separated from the sun. Although the sunlight is out of the actual ball of the sun, and the sunlight, the rays extend themselves for many miles, but they're nothing more than rays than the light of the source of their light, of sun. Mikol Mokim, nonetheless, Hein Gvuroisav Shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But in fact, this ability to withhold is in fact the strength, the attribute of Gevura of God Almighty. Asher Kol Yochol, because He is able to do everything and anything, omnipotent, and there is nothing that God cannot do. So He can even conceal Himself and give the appearance of His being absent, God forbid, and therefore the world being a separate entity. And He is able, litzamtzem hachayus, to constrain, to contract the godly vitality, the life, the haruchnius and the spirituality, hanishpa meiruach piv, which is coming and flowing from the breath of His mouth, as we discussed earlier, that creation is through God's speech, as it were, although there isn't any physical speech, but God uses these terms for us to be able to relate to. In fact, of course, there is speech, just not the kind of speech that we can understand. And when we use certain words and terminologies, we misuse them because we're using them from our perspective. So when we say talk, we mean something. And that's not what God's speech is. But of course, if He says that He speaks, that's the real speaking that we may not be able to understand. But we explained at length in a previous class that basically, just as speech in human terms is communication, or if you will, revelation. When one feels or thinks or knows something, for themselves, they need not express it verbally. But to bring it out for others, they speak. So too is with God's speech. God speaks, and that is a revelation of what's contained within Him. So all of creation is through God's speaking. And that's why it's referred to as the 10 ma'amaros, the 10 statements, utterances of God. And in Genesis it says, Vayomer Elohim, and God said, let there be, etc. Ulahastiroi, and he is able to conceal this godly energy and this spirituality coming from him. Shelo yibatel guf hanivra b'mitzius, so that the actual existence, the body of the created entity, should not become totally and completely nullified from existence. If not for this attribute of gvura, of concealment, of contracting, of holding back, then the created entity wouldn't exist as a separate entity. It wouldn't be. Now, if you're having difficulty comprehending what does that mean, says the Alter Rebbe, the author, V'zeh, and this concept, Ein b'seichel shum nivra, no created entity has the intellectual capacity lahasig, to grasp, mahus hatzimtzum v'hahester, the essence of this contraction, of this concealment. V'sheyihye afal pichin guf hanivra nivra me'ayin liyesh. And yet, at the same time, while we say that God is holding back and contracting and concealing himself, at the same time, that created entity, everything that's created, is being created from absolute nothingness into being something. Just as no intellect of any created entity, which means even the highest angels, has the ability lahasig mahus habriya me'ayin liyesh, to really grasp the essence of creation, which is something from nothing. So as we've discussed previously, all we are able to do is to deal with material, with yesh, with something which exists, and change its form, make something with it. So all the scientists in the world and all the laboratories in the world and all the experiments, everything can only, so to say, play around with that which already exists. We cannot create. So when we use the word creation, it really is inaccurate to use that word with regards to anything or anyone other than the Creator himself, and that's God. We can use the word invention. We can use the word discover. So for example, electricity. Electricity is a certain energy which was discovered at a certain point, and over time, or we are in the process of learning how to use it, how to deal with it, and when it can be dangerous, and how to prevent tragedy, and how to benefit from it. And the whole world benefits from energy of electricity. When was that electricity created? When the person discovered it? No. It was created back in the 6 days of creation, when God created everything. Electricity was put into creation. It may not have surfaced or been discovered, it's always been there. So that's all we're able to do, is to take matter and to alter it and to come up with all sorts of incredible things. But any discovery, anything, as magnificent as it may be, any type of healing, any type of medication, on any level, in any of the sciences, none of it is yesh me'ayin, something from absolute nothingness. A person could look at an amazing artwork or at an amazing building and say, wow, look at that building. So many details went into that. Brilliant. Not one iota of that amazing billion times of details was created something from nothing. It's all material which exists. Just as a simple chair, a wooden chair, is made from a tree, from wood, just as clothing are made from wool of a sheep, etc., 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 everything, be it radio waves, and then finally, wow, an invention, a radio, wow, a telephone, a television, a computer, and on and on and on. It doesn't matter how far advanced we're going to get. No one has created something from nothing. It may have been a tremendous invention to get this huge, heavy ship to start flying into the air. Amazing. Nothing, not the gas, nothing was created by man. Man can't do that. So therefore, in essence, no one, not only human beings, no created entity can truly grasp the essence of creation, something from nothing. Just as we can't do it, we can't grasp it. We can talk about it. We can meditate about it. We can speak so much about it that at a certain point, we might actually take it for granted to the extent that we think we understand it. But if we stop for a moment and we say, one moment, certain scientific things I can understand. Certain laws of physics, I can understand how they work. And you can tell a person that if you do this and then you do that, the result will definitely be this. Fine. We cannot understand creation, something from nothing. So too, just as we can't understand the essence of creation, yesh me'ayin, something from nothing, so too, we can't understand how simultaneously God is using his attribute of strength, of concealment, of contraction, of withholding, and at the very same time, he is creating something from nothing. Because we can't really understand creation, something from nothing. All right, now we have the brackets over here. Sort of a note that the author is giving. It goes on from here to the end of the chapter. But you'll notice that at the end of the chapter, the closing part of the brackets are missing in our printed version of the Tanya. So there are, in fact, two options. One is that it's simply a typing error, and it really should be at the end of the chapter. There should be the closing of the brackets before we go on to chapter 5. However, the other option is that where do these brackets really end? The brackets we're about to start now, they go all the way to the end of chapter 5. Now, chapter 5, and let me just explain how it came about that the printer, the original printer, made a mistake. You see, if you look at the end of chapter 5, if you're able to follow in the original, in the Hebrew, so that would be on the next page, next side, page Pei, which is page 80A. So the last little piece, like the last line of chapter 5, in brackets, has a reference. It's just listing which pages it is in the books of Kabbalah. So it's giving us a couple of pages of references. And then the brackets close. Apparently, in the original manuscript, it would have been 2 closing brackets there. Because the first one is just to close off that line. The second one is the end of the brackets that we're starting now towards the end of chapter 4. And when the printer saw that, he thought that was a mistake. Why put 2 closing brackets one after the other, not realizing that the first one started all the way at the end of chapter 4. So if we take that approach, that means that the entire chapter 5 is all, so to say, a note. It's all within brackets. Be that as it may, we now begin a parenthetical statement at this point. We're at the end of chapter 4. It's about 10 lines from the bottom of the chapter. V'hinei, and behold, Bechinas hatzimtzum v'hester hachayus. In Kabbalistic terms, in the esoteric part of the Torah, this contraction and concealment that we're talking about, of withholding the godly energy, nikra b'shem kelim, is called vessels. V'achayus atzmoi, and the godly energy itself, the flow of energy which is being held back, but that energy itself, nikra b'shem oir, is called light. So now we have introduced two terms, kelim and oir. Oir is the light, and that would be infinite. That would be this godly flow of infinite, intense energy. And the kelim are the vessels which withhold and contain the infinite light. Shekmoi, now he's going to explain why do we call them vessels and light. Shekmoi, that just as shakelim mechase al mashe besoichoi, just as the vessel conceals that which is contained within it, kach, so too, bechinas hatzimtzum, this element, this aspect of tzimtzum, of contracting, mechase umastir, covers and conceals, ha'or v'hachayus, the light and the vitality, the energy, ha'shefeya, which is flowing forth. So, today, with more sophisticated and more advanced science, we can give all sorts of examples from the world of physics, from the world of various sciences. But even in very, very simple terms, going back some 250 years, you can have any substance, be it water, be it food, be it rocks, or light, anything. And you have this container. So the container holds it that it shouldn't just go further. It blocks. And that is called the keli. So for example, if there's very, very strong, intense light, and it's too intense, it's blinding, so therefore you put a cover. That cover is a vessel which is hiding at least part of it, or at least the intensity of the light. So now with that, you don't have that intense light, which if it's too intense, then that's the benefit not to have it. The concealment is necessary. Although it sounds to us at times like concealment is negative, concealment is bad, we'd rather have it all. No, you wouldn't. You wouldn't rather have it all. It's too much. It's literally blinding. Now, you don't want it to be totally dark. So to say, the trick is to have the proper balance, to have the proper, prescription. So if you have sunglasses to block out the light, or if you have a tinted window or whatever, or you have a curtain, you want it to be sufficient to allow a healthy amount of this intense light to come forth. So that concealment, that curtain, is called keli, vessel. Vakelim, and these vessels that we're talking about, hein, they are in fact ha'oisiyos, the letters. All right? We mentioned in chapter 1 all about letters. God created the world with words, with letters of the holy tongue, of the original language, Lashon HaKodesh, which is referred to as Hebrew. That is the language of creation. That is the language of the Torah. That is the one and only true language. All other languages are man-made. They're derivatives of this original language, and some of them you can trace back and see the similarity in a much easier way, and some of them are much further because it's a language which evolved from and you're many steps away. Be that as it may, there are 22 letters of the original holy tongue, the Aleph base, the alphabet. 22 regular letters. With those letters, with the combination of those letters, to make up words and sentences and phrases and statements, God creates the world. What does that mean? Why does he use words? Ha'oisios. Shesharshan Hey oisios mansapach. Now, their root of these letters, which are used in creation, and they are those which are contracting and concealing the infinite light, they go back to the 5 letters which are known Kabbalistically as Mansapach. Mem, Nun, Tzadik, Pei, Chof. Those are the 5 letters in the Holy Tongue, in the Hebrew alphabet, the only letters which take on a different form. That if they are at the end of a word, as a rule, they are written differently. They're called final letters. So for those of you that know the Hebrew alphabet and know Hebrew, know how to read Hebrew, you'll be able to understand what I'm about to say. Otherwise, for those of you that have very little or absolutely no knowledge of the Hebrew alphabet, let me try to briefly explain. The first letter is Aleph. Sort of, in the English language, that would be the equivalent of A. The second letter is Beis, or in the Sephardic pronunciation, Bet. That would be the equivalent to B. Now, there's 22 letters. When you get to the 12th letter, the 11th letter, first of all. The 11th letter is the letter Kaf. If it's anywhere other than the last letter of a word, it's a Kaf. It has a certain shape. It looks like, in English, that would be a backward C. Backward C. That's pretty much what a Kaf looks like. Now, if it's at the end of a word, if it's the last letter of a word, doesn't matter how many letters the word has. The word may have 2 letters, so it's a second letter. The word may have 18 letters, it's the 18th letter. If it's the last letter of a word, then it takes on a different form. And it is written, like in the Torah scroll, differently. All right? And then 2 letters later, the letter Mem, same idea. So there's 5 such letters. The Mem, the Nun, the Tzadik, the Pei, and then we just discussed the Kaf. Those letters, that they have this interchanging form, they are the source of severity, of strength, of strictness, of withholding. Shehein hegvurois, and they are in fact the 5 levels, the 5 types of strength. Hamechalkois, which divide, umafridois, and separate, hahevel v'hakoil, the breath and the sound of the voice, behei moitzois hapeh, in the 5 ways of things associated with verbalization. In other words, in pronouncing any letter, it's got to come from any one of the 5 parts of our verbalization. The lips, the teeth, the tongue, the palate, the roof of the mouth, and the throat, a guttural letter. Those are the 5. And every letter comes from one of them. It's pronounced physically by using one of those 5. So those are 5. Those are the 5 gevuros, because you're condensing a concept into a sound. Oh, and by the way, this really is not the discussion here, and it is a bit off topic, but I just want to throw it out there. This may sound, or one might be able to entertain the theory of how language developed going back to the caveman, of sounds. But that is not so. We categorically reject that. We do not believe it's part of the theory of evolution, which the Torah clearly, unequivocally, categorically rejects. That's not how creation was. In other words, it's not that originally man made sounds and they slowly developed into language. No, God created the world with 5 sounds, and each one of those contains letters, and at the very beginning, God said the words, Yehi Oyer, let there be light. And it became light as soon as he said that. And he continues to say those words as we discussed earlier. So language has been, from the very beginning, the holy tongue. But again, you have the 5 letters, Mansapach, which they are the source for the 5 parts of expression. And they all come from the 5 gvuros. There are 5 levels or 5 aspects to gvura, which is strictness, which is the idea of restraint. Lihis havois, to bring into formation, chaf beis oisiyos, the 22 letters. So all 22 letters come from these 5 expressions. So words, letters are in fact, by definition, contracting, concealing, hiding. One might say, I thought words were revealing. I don't know what you were thinking or what you were feeling until you expressed it. If I want to convey a certain concept to another, to someone outside of myself, I need to verbalize it. That's true. That's exactly how it is with creation. That is a concealment which reveals. That is a limitation which reveals. If it would just be a blast, a sound intensity, just like with light, if it would just be intense light, it would be totally blinding. And just like with sound, if it would just be infinitely loud, it would be completely and literally deafening. So the letters contain and contract and hold back. And that's exactly how creation works. The letters are the kelim. They are the vessels which contain in them and control and hide that godly energy. Now, the last few lines over here is going to be very Kabbalistic, meaning that the author here is going to tell us in terms and words of Kabbalah, of the esoteric, what this is. V'shoyresh ha'hegvuros, and what is the root, what is the source of these 5 aspects of strength? We're saying there's 5. What are they? Hubutzina de kardunisa. That is a particular level a godly level, which Kabbalah refers to as Butzina de Kardunisa. Shehi Gvura Ila Adatik Yoimin, which is the highest level of Gvura, which is within Atik Yoimin. Well, without explaining it in too much detail, the address is as follows. Atik Yoimin, we first find written in the book of Daniel, actually, describing a vision, a godly vision. Literally, Atik Yoimin means of ancient days. So, Kabbalah then, the Zohar primarily, and on, explains that concept. Really, it's volumes and volumes and hours, but let me try to simplify it. Just as we said earlier that one of the explanations of man being made in God's image is that by studying, by introspection of seeing how we work, we have a mind, we have a heart, we have intelligence, understanding, we have emotions. So that gives us a glimpse into understanding how the real intelligence, God's intelligence is, how the real emotions, God's emotions as it were. What do you have above and beyond intelligence, higher than intellect? So we refer to it in Kabbalistic terms as keser, the crown. Just as physically the crown on the king's head is above his head, it's outside of his brain, it encompasses his brain. So that would be the analogy for higher than intellect. And what is that? So generally speaking, there are two parts to it. Atik Yoimin is the higher part. And that would be translated in human terms as in the Hebrew, Ratzoin and Tainug. Ratzoin means will. A will. An internal essence will. When somebody wants something, not because they understand, not because they figured it out. On the contrary, they want something. And because they want it, now everything is going to follow that drive that they have. And Tainug is delight or pleasure. But again, it's not pleasure that one understands that this is beneficial. And therefore, it's this deep, deep level of one's essence, where in essence everybody wants to be in this state of perfect delight, perfect pleasure. And then because of that, the mind works in a certain way, the emotions work in a certain way. So in general, all throughout all levels, everywhere, there is the right and the left. There is the kindness, there is the giving, and there is the severity, there is the withholding. That's generally how it works throughout the entire godly creation of all these spiritual worlds. However, in this level of Atik, the inner level of this crown, which is very, very deep, there isn't the regular left as far as constraint is concerned. But it is called Gevura, strength, and from that will then evolve the 5 parts of Gevura, which the way we then relate to them is that they actually serve as kelim, as vessels, to withhold. V'sheresh hachasadim. And what is the root, what is the real source of kindness, meaning of giving? Hu gamkein chesed atik yoimin. It's also not the gevura, not the severity, but it's the chesed, the kindness of this deep level of atik yoimin. Kayadua liyoidei chein. as is known to those that know the secrets. So the Alter Rebbe didn't really explain much, and then he just concludes the chapter by saying, as those who know the secrets know. So if you know it, you know it. Which means to say as follows. Everything in this physical world really mirrors the way it is on a higher level. It's not always easy or possible to be able to identify it. But for example, within this world itself, there's a statement made in the Talmud that everything that exists on dry land in some form exists in the ocean. Anything that exists here exists there. There's a counterpart to it in the sea. All right? And similarly, the sea is an analogous for hidden, concealed spiritual worlds. So now, man has a right hand and a left hand. The right hand is considered chesed, giving. It's the stronger hand. It's the idea of giving. The left hand is considered the strict one, withholding. In general, the right side, Kabbalistically speaking, is all about revealing and giving. The left side is all about withholding, contracting, concealing. And they're both necessary, as we discussed. Shemesh umagen, sun and sheath, or protection. Now, how many fingers are there on each hand? It's not a coincidence. On the human hand, there are 5 fingers on each hand, which correspond to these 5 aspects of Gevura for the left hand, and the 5 Kabbalistic aspects of Chesed of the right hand. So at this point, what we need to just make sure to have it clear is that it's very important not to misunderstand. And that is that generally speaking, one might make the mistake and think that Gevura is bad. Gevura means to hold back. And one might think that's being strict. Yes, strict and boundaries are not necessarily bad. Speak to any proper educator. Boundaries are important. To establish a healthy, progressive, and productive individual, there need to be boundaries in the right way, with a proper balance, etc. So can it be bad? Absolutely. Anything can, too much, or if you don't have the proper balance, or without kalim, light, without the vessel, would be destructive. Too much good is no good. Let the sun just, beyond any type of limitation, let it burn up everything. That's no good. Kalim without light, well, that we understand is no good. So just to bring it down to a very, very simple, practical example, being we spoke so high over here in these Kabbalistic terms. So let's say relationship with a child as a parent or an educator. To be too strict with the child is not healthy. It could harm them emotionally, God forbid. To always say no, no, and no, and to not allow for any type of freedom is not good. To constantly, punitively punish, the old school, to use the whip, to constantly hit or beat the child for their own good, not healthy. Not good. On the other hand, extreme kindness with no boundaries, no good. Not only will that child become spoiled, that child, according to laws of nature, of the psychology of that child would grow up to become a criminal. It will grow up to feel that I deserve everything, I get everything, and it's all about me, me, and me. Totally selfish, at the expense of everyone else. The child, every time they want something, gimme. Sure. I want. Sure. Doesn't work that way. So there has to be boundaries. You have to be giving, you have to be kind, and you have to also withhold. That's how creation works. The reason why it's like that with regards to human relations is because that's only the result, but that's really the sources, because that's how the Creator is working. That's how He created it. So there's the 5 points of chesed, of kindness, of giving, of revealing, and then there's the 5 points of gevura, of strictness, of withholding. And that's the story of creation. First, there's the chesed, then there's the gevura. There is the or, the light, then there is the keli, the vessel. And that brings us to chapter 5. Which in chapter 5, the author is going to introduce us to a third midah, a third attribute. So stay tuned for that. In the meantime, wishing everybody tremendous success in serving God, in preparing the world for the day, which is sooner than soon, when all of creation will truly recognize the Creator, and we will all serve God in unison with the coming and the full revelation of our righteous Mashiach now. Thank you.